the month during which Umalusi celebrated its 20th anniversary, we launched an important research report titled International Benchmarking of the National Senior Certificate. This study, which was commissioned to ACTIS, formerly known as the UK Matric, benchmarked the National Senior Certificate against 5 international qualifications: the International Baccalaureate Diploma Program, Kenya Certificate of Secondary Education, New South Wales High School Certificate, the Zimbabwean Forms 5 to 6 Advanced Level, and Cambridge Assessment International Education AS and A levels. The overall conclusion of this study is that the NSC provides its holders with an internationally comparable level of education. The full report is accessible on the Umalusi website, www.umalusi.org.za. Umalusi derives its mandate from 2 pieces of legislation. As South Africa's Quality Council for General and Further Education and Training, Umalusi derives its mandate from the General and Further Education and Training Quality Assurance GETC Act 58 of 2001 as amended in 2008, and the National Qualifications Framework Act 67 of 2008 as amended. Section 17A of the same Act, the GETC Act, confers a range of powers and functions on Umalusi in relation to quality assurance. Amongst the functions included under these sections are that the Council must perform the external moderation of assessment of all assessment bodies and education institutions, and the Council may adjust raw marks during the standardization process. Umalusi exercises these powers and functions to both public and private assessment bodies. The sections of the GETC Act that I've just quoted signal that Umalusi is entrusted with a very important task of assuring the quality of the entire value chain of the national examination process. It is the vision of Umalusi to be a trusted authority in fostering high education standards in general and further education and training sector of South Africa. The operative word here is trust. Therefore, at the heart of Umalusi's quality assurance processes is the need to inculcate trust in the people of South Africa and those beyond the borders. One of the critically important tasks performed by Umalusi before the start of the examination is the audit of the state of readiness of the public and private assessment bodies to manage and conduct national examinations. This was done, and Umalusi reported publicly on 14 October 2022 that the system was ready to conduct, administer, and manage the 2022 end-of-year national examinations. Concerning the quality assurance of assessment processes, Umalusi externally moderated and approved question papers, school-based assessment tasks, site-based assessment tasks, common assessment tasks, internal continuous assessment portfolios, and internal continuous assessment. We monitored a sample of examination centers during the writing of the examinations. Umalusi participated in marking guidelines standardization meetings in a selection of subjects. Umalusi monitored selected marking centers during the marking process and verified quality of marking in selected subjects. This examination experienced some hindrances in terms of the smooth running of examinations. In November 2022, Umalusi expressed its concern about the effect of load shedding, community protests, and reported cases of cheating on the smooth running and the integrity of the examinations. With regard to load shedding, Umalusi is pleased that all assessment bodies heeded the advice to make alternative arrangements to mitigate the possibility of load shedding, particularly on the days when subjects such as computer applications technology, GETC, and information technology, IT, were written. In relation to community protests, Umalusi received reports that in instances where candidates either started the examination later than the stipulated time or missed them completely on the scheduled date due to no fault of their own, alternative arrangements were made to the affected candidate to write the examination like every other candidate. The special examinations were based on externally moderated backup papers, question papers, the standard of which compares with that of the original papers. We appreciate, as Umalusi, the effort of all the 4 assessment bodies for ensuring that candidates were shielded from all these hindrances and thereby ensuring that the integrity and credibility of the 2022 national examinations is not compromised. In the performance of its legislated areas of work, Umalusi leaves no assessment body behind. Umalusi engages constantly with assessment bodies. To illustrate the point, during the year 2021, Umalusi embarked on a process to review and strengthen the approaches and principles used to standardize results. The process was conducted through work streams, and letters were sent to assessment bodies inviting them to submit proposals to Umalusi in terms of how to strengthen the approaches and principles. In consideration of the proposals received from assessment bodies, Umalusi Council approved, on the recommendation of the Assessment Standards Committee of Council, the slight amendments introduced to the current standardization principles. The intention with the amendments had been to bring greater degree of clarity and simplification from the point of view of language. Upon the approval, the principles were submitted to all assessment bodies in May 2022. About the reported cases of examinations irregularities, another equally important matter about which Umalusi remains seriously concerned are reported cases of irregularities during the writing of the examinations. According to the reports received from different assessment bodies, different forms of cheating were uncovered in some centers during the examinations. This includes candidates found in possession of crypt notes and or cell phones, sharing of answers via WhatsApp groups, imposters found in the examinations rooms. Some answer scripts had different handwritings, etc. Based on the magnitude of the offenses, different sanctions have been meted out against the candidates involved in such malpractices, such as the nullification of results, barring the candidates from writing the examinations for either 1 or 2 examination cycles. Professor Yunus Balim will present more details on these matters in his report. Umalusi gives commendation to all the assessment bodies for having uncovered the malpractices and dealing with the culprits. This is one important way of safeguarding the integrity and credibility of all the qualifications on the Umalusi sub-framework of qualifications. Umalusi remains concerned, ladies and gentlemen, about some of the questions that were found problematic in some subjects during this examination cycle. Let me briefly share with you examples of cases where questions were excluded from the marking process because of their problematic nature. These are examples of cases where questions were excluded. With the Independent Examinations Board, IEB, their NSC History Paper 2, question 3.4.1, carried 2 marks. It referred candidates to find a historical concept in paragraph 2 instead of paragraph 1. Still with IEB, GETC English. Question 5A and question 5B, worth 4 marks, required candidates to identify the underlined words and write them in full where no words were underlined. So that left candidates lost. Department of Basic Education, National Senior Certificate, Mathematical Literacy, Paper 2. Question 426, 6 marks. Erroneously refers candidates to the year 2019 instead of 2020. NSC Sepedi Language Paper 2, question 2.5, 2 marks, refers to an incorrect word that was used. The wrong word, hakancho, instead of hakanchano, was used. These problematic questions resulted in marking concessions being applied by the relevant assessment bodies for them to be excluded either entirely or partially from the question papers. Some of the requests for marking concessions were granted, whereas others were rejected. Regarding the problematic question 5.1, allocated 7 marks in mathematics paper 2, Professor Balim will present findings of the report of a 3-person independent panel appointed by Umalusi to investigate how the errors in the mathematics paper 2 may have crept in and went undetected until the final question paper was administered by the Department of Basic Education on the 7th of November 2022. What I can report now is that prior to the receipt of the report, Umalusi had, based on its obligation to mitigate the possible impact of the error on learner performance, advised the DBE to exclude the faulty question in its entirety from the marking. Therefore, no marks were allocated to question 5.1, 7 marks, thereby reducing the total of 150 marks by 7 marks to 143 marks for all candidates. All candidates were marked out of a total of 143, and the marks achieved by the candidates were converted to a mark of 150 marks through a scaling process. Such errors cannot be justified and are therefore regrettable. Umalusi wishes to apologize profusely for these errors in question papers. The South African public must find comfort in the fact that Umalusi, as a quality counsel, has tried and tested methods to remedy the situation where such unfortunate errors are detected late in the question paper. Our tried and tested approaches ensure that no learner is disadvantaged by the error in the question paper. The mitigating measures are implemented either during marking or during the standardization meetings. The greatest mistake is to imagine that human beings will never commit mistakes. Mistakes will always happen, ladies and gentlemen, where human beings are involved. The tests of the resilience of the system is found in a system that is able to self-correct and normalize the situation in the unlikely event of errors being detected late in the value chain. There lies the strength of the system, that we are able to correct and level the playing field where errors are detected late in the system. Umalusi will be hosting a webinar on question paper development processes, the use of the missing script formula, the examination concessions, and the scaling up formula used when a question is discarded because it was wrong. The webinar will be in February 2023. The members of the media will be invited to this webinar. February 2023, we have an appointment. Regarding all matters concerning how these examinations were run, Umalusi is finalizing detailed reports to highlight areas of non-compliance and directives for compliance and improvement for the future for all assessment bodies. That report will be sent to the different assessment bodies, and it will be put on our website. About standardization of examination results. Standardization, colleagues, is a quality assurance process that is based on principles and is used worldwide to mitigate the impact on learner performance caused by factors other than the learner's subject knowledge, abilities, and aptitude. Any large-scale examination process invariably has many and varied sources of variability. Most of these are unplanned, unintended, and undesirable. They vary from mistakes in a question paper to subtle issues of level of difficulty of a question paper and possible multiple and valid interpretation of questions. In the main, standardization has two objectives. First, to ensure that a cohort of learners is not advantaged or disadvantaged by factors other than their knowledge of the subject, abilities, and their aptitude. Second, to achieve comparability and consistency of learner performance across the years and the various subjects within the given year. The approach that Umalusi uses to standardize marks is norm referencing. In simple terms, this means that whenever there is a deviation from the norm in terms of performance, the whole distribution, not individual marks, is adjusted either upwards or downward towards the norm. As I mentioned already, the direction of adjustment downward or upward is based on the evidence presented. Subjects are standardized individually and in a non-iterative manner. Let me take this opportunity to assure all South Africans that the Assessment Standards Committee of Umalusi Council, under the leadership of Professor Loizo Chita, arrives at standardization decisions after going through quantitative and qualitative reports to find evidence to serve as the basis for its decisions. Thus, the decisions of the committee are not based solely on statistical information, graphs and tables, but also on qualitative reports that we receive from the experts, be they researchers, examiners, internal moderators, and external moderators. Colleagues, we consider all forms of evidential information when we standardize. Umalusi is deeply indebted to the ASC because it carries responsibility for ensuring that Umalusi truly honors its vision of being a trusted authority in fostering high education standards in the general and further education and training space. The ASC Assessment Standards Committee is constituted by highly qualified academics who are willing to sacrifice their valuable time during the festive season to ensure the best outcome for our learners. As I conclude, I want to inform members of the public that Umalusi is seriously concerned about candidates who register to write It is equally concerning that there are some unaccredited centers, independent schools and private colleges that admit learners fully aware that they are operating unlawfully. In this regard, we urge the public to access a presentation titled "What to Look For in Choosing an Independent School or Private College" on the Umalusi website, www.umalusi.org.za. That is our website. This information is very useful because it assists you to verify if an independent school or a private college is accredited before you can register with it. Finally, I want to express Umalusi's deep appreciation to every single player in both the public and private assessment system for putting great effort into ensuring that the class of 2022 reaches this stage. Ladies and gentlemen, I thank you. Please join me in welcoming the chairperson of the 6th Umalusi Council, Professor Eunice Balim, to present the details of the findings of Umalusi's quality assurance in respect of the results of examinations conducted and managed by the IEB, Sakai, DBE, DHET in November 2022. Professor Eunice Balim is the founding Vice Chancellor of Solplaki University in Kimberley. He is now Emeritus Professor in the Engineering Department at the University of Witwatersrand. Professor Balim, you're welcome. Thank you very much. Thanks for listening to me, ladies and gentlemen.
Thank you, Dr. and thank you for the introduction. Greetings all, and please allow me to make two brief points which are related but not really on the script. On behalf of Umalusi Council and Umalusi itself. The first is to just express our sadness at the passing of Mefrini Jinwala. She lived a life in which she pursued a good purpose, and she served that purpose very well. But in our few encounters that I had in shared discussions around the table, but also in announcements, she was a fierce defender of the importance of education. Understood that very carefully, but she was also critically engaged with all of those who were charged with the burden or the task of educating our children. The second point I want to make on behalf of Umalusi and its council is to express our concern at the frequent, repeated, and often fatal attacks on staff and leadership of our education institutions. Most recently, of course, was the attack on the Vice Chancellor at Fort Hare University. It's not the first. And sadly, an innocent person is life in that attack. This is an attack, of course it's an attack on person, and it leaves us sad. We have a family without a father, without a husband, without a brother, and we're very sad at that. But it's also a full frontal attack on the education of young people in this country. And we really do want to express our deep concern at this development. And to ask the general public in our country, please, not about taking action against it, but at least to speak out against this. This is an attack that as a society we can ill afford, and we certainly should, not be tolerating. Thank you. As explained by the CEO, Dr. Rakometsi, Section 17A, Part 4 of the General and Further Education Training Quality Assurance Act, so-called GENFETQUA Act, as amended in 2008, entrusts Umalusi with the duty and the power to perform standardization of examination results at exit points. And it states that the Council may adjust row marks during the standardization process. That's an important point of departure for the presentation. Accordingly, the Assessment Standards Committee of the Umalusi Council held its meetings between the 12th of November 2022 and the 9th of January 2023 to standardize the results of examinations in 510 subjects. The subjects are spread over 4 qualifications that are assessed by the Department of Basic Education, the Department of Higher Education and Training, the Independent Examinations Board, and the South African Comprehensive Assessment Institute. Colleagues, the standardization principles of Umalusi are a matter of public knowledge. Employers and education institutions are expected to make judgments on employment and admission based on learning achievements. To confidence for the fact that Umalusi relies on consistently applied defensible standardization principles in adjusting marks. More importantly, parents and learners rely on persistent educational principles to ascertain the reliability and validity of the results that their students achieve. It is that awareness that gives such institutions and other stakeholders confidence in the results that appear on a learner's certificate of educational achievement. It is necessary at this stage to remind us about 3 important principles of standardization. The first is that in general, adjustments should not exceed 10 percentage points, or the so-called average, what is referred to as the norm. And there are 2 subcomponents to this point. The first is that no adjusted mark should go beyond the norm or the historical average. And the second point is that no adjustment should exceed 10 percentage points. In exceptional circumstances, sorry, my technology has done a strange thing. It's gone to the end of my presentation. It's probably telling me something that I should hurry up. I do have a hard copy if necessary. In exceptional circumstances, adjustments in excess of 10% may be considered and recommended by the Assessment Standards Committee to EXCO of Council for approval, in instances where there are compelling reasons to do so. However, this principle should also be read in conjunction with the idea that adjustments do not go beyond the norm. In the case of individual candidates, the adjustment affected should not exceed 50% of the raw mark achieved by the candidate. Again, this principle should be read in conjunction with the first principle that I read. As Dr. Rakamit has mentioned, the standardization principles were strengthened in 2022 in consultation with all 4 assessment bodies. I find it necessary to inform the South African public that the ASC arrives at its decisions after going through various qualitative and quantitative reports to look at evidence that can serve as the basis for its decisions. In other words, this is not a formulaic approach. While there is a formula, the committee does not rely entirely on a mathematical formula. The committee spent a considerable amount of time carefully analyzing and discussing the information at its disposal in connection with each of the subjects presented across the 4 qualifications assessed by the 4 assessment bodies. The Council is quite involved and rigorous, the process is quite involved and rigorous, and this is done to safeguard the integrity and credibility of all the results presented. It is equally important to inform members of the public that the Assessment Standards Committee standardization process have built-in mechanisms for review and appeal, to be used whenever an assessment body presents a proposal which differs from the decision of the ASC. One such mechanism is the practice of parking subjects to allow the assessment body to gather new evidence and to strengthen its argument that it wishes to present to the ASC in motivation for an alternative proposal for standardizations. And these are very carefully considered. The final decision of the ASC are then presented for the consideration consideration of the Executive Committee of Council during its meetings to approve the release of results. I am now going to present EXCO's approval decision for each qualification and assessment body, starting with the National Senior Certificate. The NSC is offered by 3 assessment bodies, namely Sakai, the IEB and the DBE. Remember, the first 2 are private assessment bodies. The DBE is a public assessment body. Let me start with the results of the South African Comprehensive Assessment Institute, or Sakai. The Sakai has for the first time conducted and managed the 2022 examination as a fully accredited assessment body after Umalusi granted full accreditation status to assess the NSC and the General Education and Training Certificate for adult education and training, with effect from 1st October 2022. The Sakai administered the NSC exams to 4,951 candidates in 2022. The Sakai presented to Umalusi 25 subjects for standardization. After considering reports and the reports presented, raw marks were accepted for 15 of these subjects, so 60% of them. 7 subjects were adjusted mainly upwards, that is 28%, and the remaining 3 subjects were adjusted mainly downward. In general, the number of subjects that has been offered by Sakai over the past 4 years has remained reasonably constant, and its performance has been consolidating. Colleagues, there's much more detail in my report that, of course, will be available to you in the hard copy of the presentation that you will receive. I will merely highlight a few of the figures. And as I said, these hard copies will be made available to you after the presentation. Just to highlight a few, in the case of Sakai, the raw marks were accepted for subjects like accounting, life sciences and physical sciences. History, on the other hand, was adjusted upwards. Mathematical literacy and mathematics were adjusted downwards. As I say, all of the subjects is included. And now to formally read the statement of the approval and release of results. Having studied all the evidence presented, the Executive Committee of Umalusi Council concluded that the examinations were administered largely in accordance with the regulations pertaining to the conduct, administration and management of the National Senior Certificate Examination. The irregularities identified during the writing and marking of the examinations were not systemic and therefore did not compromise the overall validity and integrity of the November 2022 National Senior Certificate Examinations administered by the South African Comprehensive Assessment Institute. The Executive Committee of Council therefore approves the release of the Sakai November 2022 National Senior Certificate Examination results. In respect of an identified irregularity, the Sakai is required to nullify the results of the candidate implicated in irregularity. Umalusi is concerned about the storage of examination scripts at examination centers for a prolonged period and the negligence observed in the sharing of question papers with the Umalusi post-examination analysis team, which led to a compromise of 4 approved November 2022 NSC examination question papers. The Executive Committee of Council commends the Sakai for conducting a successful examination. I now move on to focus on the IEB results. The IEB had 13,506 candidates who wrote the examination in 262 examination centers in 2022. The total number of subjects presented by the IEB for standardizations was 61, and after considering the accompanying evidence, raw marks were accepted for 47 of the subjects, that's 77%. Mainly upward adjustments were effected in 10 subjects, 16%, downward adjustments were made in 4 subjects, around 7%. Again, the number of subjects remained reasonably consistent in the IEB, if slightly decreasing over the past 4 years. But in general, the IEB is holding a fairly constant and steady ship. Just for as illustration, raw marks in the IEB system was accepted for geography, mathematical literacy, and mathematics. Mainly upward adjustments were effected for history, and mainly downward adjustments affected for accounting and for life sciences. For IEB then, the statement to approve the release of results reads as follows. Having studied all the evidence presented, the Executive Committee of Umalusi Council concluded that the examinations were administered largely in accordance with the examination policies and regulations. The irregularities identified during the writing and marking of the examinations were not systemic and therefore did not compromise the overall credibility and integrity of November 2022 National Senior Certificate Examinations administered by the Independent Examinations Board. The Executive Committee of Council therefore approves the release of the IEB November 2022 National Senior Certificate Examination results. With respect to identified irregularities, the IEB is required to notify the results of all candidates implicated in irregularities. The Executive Committee of Council commends the IEB for conducting a successful examination. Colleagues, the third set of NSC results that EXO considered are those of the Department of Basic Education. The DBE's examinations were administered to 921,879 candidates. Of this number, 167,119, or just around 18% of candidates, were part-time candidates. The examinations were administered at 6,907 centers throughout the country. Marking of examination scripts happened at 191 centers. The DBE presented Umalusi with 66 subjects for standardization. And after considering these and analyzing and intensely discussing qualitative and quantitative information provided to the Assessment Standards Committee in connection with each of the 66 subjects, raw marks were accepted for 47 subjects, that's just over 71%. Mainly upward adjustments were made on 16 subjects, or around 24%, and mainly downward adjustments were affected in 3 of the subjects, and that's around 5%. Again, the number of subjects offered by the DBE has remained constant. I do want to speak particularly to the problem question 1, which Dr. Rakomet has also referred to. Umalusi appointed a 3-person independent panel to investigate how the errors in mathematics paper 2 may have crept in and went undetected until the final question paper was administered by the DBE on 7th of November 2022. In terms of process, the panel ordered 4 processes that are linked to the question paper, and these are the examination paper development process, the external moderating process, editing and typesetting processes, and proofreading process. The panel evaluated the documents provided, interviewed the internal and external moderators, and language editors. Based on this, the finding of the panel is that the error in mathematics paper 2 occurred at the very last step in the chain of internal and external moderation, and language editing and typesetting. Before the submission of the report, Umalusi had, based on its obligation to mitigate the possible impact of the error on learner performance, advised the DBE to exclude the faulty question in its entirety from the marking. Therefore, no marks were allocated to question 5.1, which amounted to 7 marks, by reducing the total of 150 marks for that paper, which was paper 2, the adjustment was to paper 2 only, which counts 150 marks. All candidates were marked out of a total of 143 marks, and the marks achieved were converted to a mark of 150 marks. So, in other words, the benefit was an upscaling benefit to correct for the error. The mainly upward adjustment of marks for students in mathematics, which was done by the Assessment Standards Committee, has further dealt with the error in the mathematics paper. Umalusi is satisfied that it has mitigated the effect of the error in the paper through the standardization process. The mainly upward computer adjustment served as an additional mitigating factor, as I said. Since at the heart of the process, or rather the focus of the process was to find solutions, EXCO is grateful that both Umalusi and the DBE have derived valuable lessons from the panel's work in terms of how to manage the real or perceived errors in the question paper going forward. The lessons should be extended to the rest of the assessment bodies in order to strengthen the system on a continuous basis. And the panel that I referred to has been very constructive and useful recommendations on how the system and processes can be improved with this kind of oversight. In the case of the DBE, again just to highlight examples, subjects like accounting, English home language, mathematics literacy, physical sciences, the marks were accepted in their raw state. In the case of, sorry, I've lost my place now. In the case of, for example, history and mathematics, marks were adjusted upwards. In the case of economics and geography, as examples, there was a generally downward adjustment. And that then to the statement of approval for the release of the results. Having studied all the evidence presented, the Executive Committee of Umalusi Council concluded that the examinations were administered largely in accordance with regulations pertaining to the conduct, administration and management of the National Senior Certificate Examination. The irregularities identified during the writing and marking of the examinations were not systemic and therefore did not compromise the overall credibility and integrity of the November 2022 National Senior Certificate Examinations administered by the Department of Basic Education. The Executive Committee of Council therefore approves the release of the DBE November 2022 National Senior Certificate Examination results. In respect of identified irregularities, the DBE is required to block the results of all candidates implicated in irregularities, including the candidates who were implicated in alleged acts of dishonesty, pending the outcome of the DBE investigations and verification by Umalusi. Particular attention should be paid to recurring matters of non-compliance. The Executive Committee of Council commends the DBE for conducting a successful examination on such a large scale. I will now turn to the General Education and Training Certificate, or so-called GETC, which is administered by Sakai, IEP and the DHET. I'll start with the Sakai results. Sakai administered this examination to 374 candidates. The highlight of this year is that the raw marks were accepted in all learning areas. There were 7 subjects presented, and as I said, all marks were accepted in their raw state. This then to the approval statement for the release of the result. Having studied all the evidence presented, the Executive Committee of Umalusi Council concluded that the examinations were administered largely in accordance with the applicable policies and guidelines. There were no systemic irregularities reported that might have compromised the overall credibility and integrity of the November 2022 General Education and Training Certificate for Adult Basic Education and Training. examinations administered by the South African Comprehensive Assessment Institute. The Executive Committee of Council approves the release of the Sakai November 22 GETC ABET examination results. The Executive Committee of Council commends Sakai for conducting a successful and irregularity-free examination. I now turn to the GETC results for the IEB. The IEB administered the 2022 examination to 467 candidates in 7 learning areas. Of the 7 learning areas, raw marks were accepted for 4 subjects, whereas downward adjustments were made in the 3 learning areas. And no upward adjustments were made in 2022. And that takes us to the statement to approve the release of results. Having studied all the evidence presented, the Executive Committee of EXCO, or rather the Executive Committee of Umalusi Council, concluded that the examinations were administered largely in accordance with the applicable policies and guidelines. There were no systemic irregularities reported that might have compromised the overall credibility and integrity of the November 2022 General Education and Training Certificate, Adult Basic Education Training examinations administered by the Independent Examinations Board. The Executive Committee of Council approved the release of the IEB November 2022 GETC ABET examination results. The Executive Committee of Council commends the IEB for conducting a successful examination. In this final section of the statement, the focus is on 3 sets of results linked to the examinations administered by the Department of Higher Education and Training. I deal first with the GETC results. The DHET administered these examinations to 36,742 candidates in 26 learning areas. The 26 learning areas were presented for standardization, and the decisions taken were as follows. Raw marks were accepted for the 10 learning areas. 11 learning areas were adjusted mainly upward, and 5 learning areas were adjusted mainly downward. The number of subjects presented has remained consistent over the past 3 years. And that leads me to the statement of approval. Having studied all the evidence presented, the Executive Committee of Umalusi Council concluded that the examinations were administered largely in accordance with the national policy pertaining to the conduct, administration and management of the examinations of colleges established, declared or registered in terms of the Continuing Education and Training Act. The irregularities identified during writing and marking of the examination were not systemic and therefore did not compromise the overall credibility and integrity of the November 2022 General Education and Training Certificate, Adult Basic Education and Training examinations administered by the Department of Higher Education and Training. The Executive Committee of Council therefore approves the release of the DHET November 2022 GETC ABET examination results. In respect of identified irregularities, the DHET is required to block the results of all candidates implicated in irregularities, including candidates who were implicated in the alleged acts of dishonesty, pending the outcome of further DHET investigation and verification by Umalusi. Umalusi is concerned about the high number of reported cases of group copying in this round of examinations. The Executive Committee of Council commends the DHET for conducting a successful examination. I now turn to the next set of results, which are for the National Certificate Vocational Levels 2 to 4 examination. The NCV 2 to 4 examinations administered by the DHET were offered or were written by 166,184 candidates. A total of 261 instructional offerings were submitted for standardization, And the decisions taken are that raw marks were accepted for 146 of these subjects, which is about 56%. Mainly upward adjustments were made in 66 subjects, 25%, and mainly downward adjustments were affected in 49 subjects, or around 19%. And this then leads me to the approval statement for the release of the results. Having studied all the evidence presented, the Executive Committee of Umalusi Council concluded that the examination was administered largely in accordance with the national policy pertaining to the conduct, administration and management of the examination of colleges, established, declared or registered in terms of the Continuing Education and Training Act. The irregularities identified during the writing and marking of the examination were not systemic and therefore did not compromise the overall credibility and integrity of the November 2022 National Certificate Vocational Examination administered by the Department of Higher Education and Training. The Executive Committee of Council therefore approves the release of the DHET November 2022 examination results. In respect of identified irregularities, the DHET is required to block the results of all candidates implicated in irregularities, including the candidates who were implicated in the alleged acts of dishonesty, pending the outcome of further DHET investigations and verification by Umalusi. The Executive Committee of Council commends the DHET for conducting a successful examination. In the case of the NATED N2 to N3 examinations administered by the DHET, the number of candidates who wrote the NATED program N2, N3 examinations was around 79,000 candidates. A total of 56 instructional offerings were submitted for standardizations, and of these, the raw marks were accepted for 35 subjects, or 63%. Mainly upward adjustments were made in 11 subjects, around 20%, and mainly downward adjustments were affected in 9 subjects, around 16%. Ladies and gentlemen, I must report that one of these subjects, the Electrical Trade Theory N3, could not be standardized for 2 reasons. Firstly, while Umalusi moderated and improved a question paper in the subject, the paper that was administered by the DHET on 22 November 2022 was not the one that was approved by Umalusi. Secondly, the paper that was administered by the DHET contained questions worth 73% of the marks that were based on an old syllabus. For these reasons, the SE felt that these were not sufficiently credible results to be standardized. The DHET has informed Umalusi that it is arranging for the candidates concerned to rewrite this examination on the 6th of February 2023. Thereafter, the results will be submitted to Umalusi for standardization and formal approval. The statement regarding the approval of the results then reads as follows. Having studied all the evidence presented, the Executive Committee of Umalusi Council concluded that the examination was administered largely in accordance with national policy pertaining to the conduct, administration and management of examinations of colleges, established, declared or registered in terms of the Continuing Education and Training Act. The irregularities identified during writing and marking of the examination were not systemic and therefore did not compromise the overall credibility and integrity of the November 2022 NATED Report 190-191 Engineering Studies N2 N3 examinations administered by the Department of Higher Education and Training. The Executive Committee of Council therefore approves the release of the DHET November 2022 NATED N2 N3 examination results. The DHET is required to, in respect of identified irregularities, block the results of all candidates implicated in irregularities, including candidates who are implicated in the alleged acts of dishonesty, pending the outcome of further DHET investigation and verification by Umalusi. They are also to nullify the November 2022 electrical trade theory N3 examination results. They are to block the results of candidates and centers that fail to comply with ICAS requirements, pending the outcome of further investigations by the DHET and verification by Umalusi. Develop a strategy to address the recurring irregularities that emanate mainly from private colleges and report on progress to Umalusi. DHET is also to submit a report on the action taken against officials implicated in irregularities. The Executive Committee of Council commends the DHET for conducting a successful examination. Regarding directives for compliance and improvement, on the basis of findings emanating from the quality assurance process that were conducted by Umalusi for each of the assessment bodies, during and after writing of the examination, Umalusi has issued to the relevant assessment bodies specific directives for compliance and improvement. The assessment bodies concerned are required to submit to Umalusi by the 15th of March 2023 their plans indicating how they will address the areas that have been flagged. In conclusion, therefore, as the Council for Quality Assurance for General and Further Education, we would like to urge all assessment bodies to ensure that the interests of students continue to be protected by the integrity of the system. Umalusi Council will continue to strive for a system that maintains high quality standards in the interests of South African learners for whom education is a constitutional right. It is precisely for this reason that all stakeholders within the South African education system are urged to approach the education of our children as a matter of social justice. As pointed out by our CEO, Dr. Rakometsi, Umalusi has put in place rigorous and robust procedures that provide assurance that all learners receive appropriate recognition for their performance in line with agreed national standards, so that no learner should feel that he or she was born in the wrong year. I thank the CEO, Dr. Rakometsi, his management team, and the staff in general at Umalusi for the excellent work that they produce at all times. These people work tirelessly and under tremendous pressure to deliver what is best for the country. I would like to thank the members of the Assessment Standards Committee under the leadership of Professor Loyiso Jita for a job very well done. On behalf of Umalusi Council, I wish to extend our hearty congratulations to the learners who have succeeded in these examinations. Congratulations are also due to their teachers, their parents, the guardians, and all those who have helped to support these learners in their studies. To those who have not succeeded, there is another chance for you. This year's, for you in this year's examinations. Please do not give up. Take heart, work hard, and you will do better this year. I wish you all the best in 2023, and I thank you for listening to me.
Thank you very much, Professor Balim, for reading the statement of the Executive Committee of Umalusi Council on the 2022 National Examination results, and thanks to the CEO of Umalusi, Dr. Rakometsi, for the opening remarks and providing the rich context to the journey that got us here. Ladies and gentlemen, now I am going to open the floor for questions, and how we're going to be doing this, I think we will take this in batches of 3 to 5 hands, and you'll ask your questions. You'll start off by introducing yourself, the media house you represent. You ask the questions, they will be responded to, and we will move on to the next round. Can I see the hands? We have got the first hand over here. This is your moment. And the second one over there. Okay, while some of the colleagues are still trying to organize their thoughts in their heads, Let's start with a colleague over here. Spiwe.
For Eyewitness News. I have a question for Mr. GETC. Mr. Ramaphosa, you mentioned that you mentioned that Council approved a slight amendment. Could you just please elaborate on that, what the amendment entails? You said you approved this.
My name is Mangoba Mkulu from EN. Clarity in terms of the irregularities. Is there an indication of how many perhaps students or candidates were caught cheating, and how far are those investigations? When are they likely, or when is Umalusi like to have conclusion on these matters? Thank you.
Do we have a third hand, Spiwe? No? Okay, let's have the... Okay.
Morning. Previously raised concerns regarding...
Please tell us who you are.
Homolemo UFM. Umalusi previously raised concerns regarding the number of learners taking mathematics and science amid the fourth industrial revolutions. Are you seeing any improvement in the number of learners taking these subjects when you compare them to last year in the private and the public sector?
Okay, let's then allow the two panel members to provide responses. Questions.
Thank you very much, Mr. Lipota. Is my mic on? I'm going to give a response, as Professor Balim rightly put it. Rakometsi is responding. Rakometsi is responding. Yeah, indeed, the standardization principles were reviewed. How we went about the review of the standardization principles is that we invited the assessment bodies to make their submissions to Umalusi as to what they want to have reviewed. Having received the inputs from all the assessment bodies, we sat down, looked at them, and applied our minds on what is reviewable and what is not. That was with the management of Umalusi. Thereafter, we took them to the recommendations to the Assessment Standards Committee of Council. And the Assessment Standards Committee looked at them, cleaned them, and ultimately took them to Council for ratification. Now, in the main, the standardization principles have, in essence, remained the same. What has changed is the language in which they were put, so that the language was simplified, so that everybody in the sector who has to have the results of his or her assessment body standardized could understand, so that there is common understanding. As a result, when we meet for standardization meetings, 90% of the proposals that are made by the assessment bodies were in agreement because of that common understanding of the standardization principles, because of the simplification of the language. Regarding the irregularities, let me focus on maybe the TBE. We've got irregularities that have been resolved. They are in two categories. Possible assistance is no more an issue. They've been resolved. The result of those students will be released. Crib notes, cell phones for the National Senior Certificate, group copying, and so forth and so on. Now, there are some unresolved irregularities where further investigation has to be conducted, and whatever the outcome is still has to be submitted to Umalusi. I'm going to mention the unresolved irregularities. Possible assistance, we've got number of cases, Eastern Cape 2, KZN 4, Northwest 2. Possible assistance in the examination. Number of candidates, Eastern Cape is 4, KZN 600, Northwest 2. Group copying, unresolved. Eastern Cape 5 centers, learners involved 52. Free State 1 center, learners involved 14. Gauteng Province 2, learners involved 6. KZN 2 centers, learners involved 118. Mpumalanga, 58 centers involved in that WhatsApp group that has been spoken about a lot in the media. 58 centers, I said. And the number of candidates involved is 1,289. 1,289. Northwest 2 centers, and then the number of learners is 9. Copying from each other, unresolved irregularities, KZN 1 center, 2 candidates involved. Mpumalanga Education, 5 centers involved, 8 learners involved. I can go on and on, the list is long. We can spend the whole day here. Not to say there were a lot of problems, but there'll be cell phone issues here, and then at the time when the investigation is conducted, the learner is not available to account for his conduct. And I need to just emphasize something here. I can go on and on. It is different handwritings. You know, script marked irregular, not supporting evidence provided. Using porn as an artistic expression. Candidates marked absent but have the script. Assistance from the scribe. With learners with disabilities, they have to be assisted by the scribe. Hello?
I apologize to you. I didn't get that part. Artistic expression.
You heard it. You see, how I know you heard it? I saw the smile on your face. Okay, let me repeat, because the smile on your face betrayed you. Using of porn as an artistic expression. Right on. Okay. Access to question paper and provision of answers during writing. Candidates stole a fellow candidate's answer script and destroyed it. I can go on and on. They are minor, few learners involved, but those are the instances. Now, in instances where we have group copying, learners being assisted by the invigilators, we have requested as Umalusi that the DBE and DHET in particular should submit reports on action taken against the officials implicated in the irregularities. Because in the majority of instances, we seem to be focusing on the candidates. But we've got invigilators here who are officials, they are teachers. So we want to see action taken in that regard. Thank you very much, Richard.
Okay. Let me respond to the question from, is it Khomole? Khomole at UFM. And your question related to the number of taking maths and science. If you listen to the numbers, it's clear that the Department of Basic Education has the overwhelmingly large number of students and learners in the system. They're just shy of about a million candidates. We have not seen any decrease in mathematics and science enrollment. The numbers are fairly static. They're in fact growing in accordance with the growth in the total number of students who are entering the system. But actually there are 2 points I want to make. I've given you the easy answer, the direct answer, which is no, there's no decrease. But there are 2 points I want to make which draw from your question and I think is implied by your question. The first is that our concern as Umalusi and as the Assessment Standards Committee is less with the number of candidates who register. Our concern is with the number of candidates who are able to get at least 50% in mathematics and in physical sciences. And as a proportion, that number has remained largely static. And I mean, I can give you the number, it's public knowledge. Around 22 to 25% of students who will write matric maths or science will manage to get at least 50%. Now, I think we'll all agree that that's not a measure of the intellectual ability of young learners in this country. It is a measure of the way in which we enculturating, educating, acculturating them into this world of learning mathematics and science. The second point I want to make is I want to take away the conversation that links mathematics and science ability with this thing called the fourth industrial revolution, as though only people who get involved in high tech and lights that go on and off and buzzers that go on and off are the people who need mathematics or need physical sciences. The reality is that competence at the high school level of mathematics should be normal and conventional for every citizen. Mathematics, remember, as I've said before, is a branch of philosophy. It's about logical reasoning. Mathematics teaches you how to distinguish between inductive and deductive reasoning. And that is a competence and a capacity that every citizen should have. You can't imagine a medical doctor doing diagnosis who is not able to tell different forms of reasoning to arrive at a conclusion. Equally, you can't imagine a factory worker who is not familiar with that competence. So ability in mathematics has less to do, yes, of course it's necessary in the world of robotics and artificial intelligence and so on, but actually it should be the business of every citizen. So the idea that mathematics is compulsory as a subject in high school is something that I would support, and that certainly Umalusi supports, so that everybody leaves with at least a basic working competence and knowledge of the principles of mathematical reasoning. And that is important for every citizen. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Agometse. Thank you, Prof. Balim. Let's now move on to the second batch of hands. I see 1, 2 over here. And while we're still doing that, we've organized lunch for everybody and we've counted the number of RSVPs we've received. So please don't leave. Okay, shall we start?
Mahlako Komane, I just wanted to find out, I'm not sure who will answer the question, in terms of the cheating and the irregularities that you know, in last year's exams, you know, were seen in last year's exams. To look like spoken about. We had similar incidences last year. I know Mr. Mhlanga himself intercepted a paper that was leaked as well last year. I'm just speaking about, are we not concerned about the cheating that seems to be, like there seems to be a trend, especially also where invigilators seem to be helping, you know, learners. Are we not concerned about the integrity of people that are tasked with ensuring that we are able to carry out a credible exam season? The second one that I'd also, I think I want to ask about is that we spoke about the questions, the issues with the that, you know, happened there. Whose responsibility is that to ensure that students do not feel that they are somewhat you know, accidents of history, or they are victims of a system that is not airtight, because nobody gets to generally write this thing that have personal goals to achieve. How does this affect them, and what are we doing, or what is the conversation being with the department to ensure that this does not happen again. Thank you very much.
From the Sowetan. Just two questions. You mentioned that there are centers that administered the exam paper without accreditation. Can you get how many of those centers and how many learners wrote in those centers, and what's going to happen to the outcomes of those exams? Number two is, can you get an assessment from Umalusi as to whether the issue of irregularities, is it getting worse or is it improving? Thank you.
Okay, that's yours.
Should I go?
Okay, so we have only two hands. Oh, we have a third one over here. So.
Pumlam Kiza from Sunday World. I have two questions. One, just to get some clarity, the error on the question 5, you said it was introduced during editing and typecasting. Can you confirm that? And in your reports you have raised a lot of issues regarding the setting of question papers, the quality of the setting of question papers by the Department of Education. What has been their reports in terms of the quality plans you have suggested?
Thank you for the questions. Prof. Doc?
Let me go first. I'm responding to Mahlaku, where you were talking about whether we are seeing more and more irregularities or not. And it is linked to the question that was asked by somebody else. So I'll ask both questions at the same time. We must find comfort in the fact that in these examinations, there have been no leaks. That has to be celebrated by South Africans. And that the irregularities that we have are maybe group-based and individual-based. And they are focused maybe in the centers. What we can expect is that with technological advancement, people will continue to create new avenues to beat the system. So the different assessment bodies have been called upon to move with the times. Move with the times. You should not be surprised if in future we have examinations online, where the papers are released just before the examination commences. Those are the innovations that the department and all other assessment bodies are looking at to beat the system, so that they are looking at all those innovative ways. Yes, indeed, it is worrisome that invigilators who are supposed to be officials of the department assist learners. Where learners sign pledges, to pledge before the start of the examinations that they are not going to be involved in any chicanery. We would want to extend that, and we have asked the assessment bodies to extend that to the invigilators, just to prick their conscience, that I signed a document to say I'm going to respect the protocols and I'm going to ensure that nothing that undermines the integrity of this examination is going to happen. Learners sign the pledge currently, invigilators must as well sign the pledge. Now, on the question of the mathematics error, who takes responsibility? Both the Department of Basic Education and Umalusi take responsibility. We take collective responsibility because we participate in the finalization of these papers. I may just add and jump to the question that was asked by somebody else to say, at what point did the error creep in? In the first iteration of moderating the paper, setting the paper, the error was not there. The error was not there. So what then happened is that the external moderator indicated the questions that need to be corrected. And question 5.1 was not one of them. Now, as the people were looking at the paper again, they realized that a symbol, a mathematical symbol, in question 5.1, the font was wrong. They inserted that new font. Now, when the external moderator looked at the paper again for the second iteration on his side, he only focused on those questions that he had said should be changed. That was just before the question paper was printed. That's how the error crept in. I want to repeat, we take collective responsibility. And it is not an error that we take lightly, as Umalusi and as the DBE. They'll speak for themselves, of course, but we don't take that question lightly. What have been lessons that have been learned out of this? And even with the three-panel member report, we are going to strengthen the system that in areas that have been pointed out by the panel members, to say even at the penultimate point of printing the paper, they must be again signed off by the internal and external moderators, and many other innovations that are suggested in the report. Now, regarding SPELO, the centers without accreditation and where learners write, we don't have such. I'll tell you why. Because if there were centers that are not accredited, would not be able to result the learners, because they wrote at a center that is not accredited. What the centers that are not accredited do is that they apply for a concession to Umalusi. And what we then do is we check them, and we write to the provincial head of department to say, are you willing to take responsibility for this center, for these examinations? If the HOD says yes, indeed, he'll then take responsibility for that center as the HOD, because that center is not accredited. They then get a green status from us to say, we allow you, because the head of department in the province is taking responsibility for the accreditation center, unaccredited centers. I've also answered on the question of whether irregularities are getting worse or better. They are getting worse. People are desperate. And we're not going to allow this train to just run, because it will affect the currency of the qualification. That is why we have appealed to all assessment bodies to put measures in place to curb these practices. And we also commend the assessment bodies for identifying the irregularities themselves without even the members of the community blowing the whistle. So the assessment bodies are on the ball in this regard. Okay, I think this has taken care of the questions raised by Mem Kize also. Thank you very much.
May I add a comment to this issue of irregularities and the accommodations that Umalusi has to, and the assessment bodies have to make in order to give what we think are credible results. And I think you've got